Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Winfree, and what you're about to listen to is an old episode of a podcast series I used to host called Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. This particular episode originally aired February 14th, 2014, and features myself and a fair chunk of Jason Teasley. He's there for a chunk of the episode, not that I'm just talking to a chunk of him. Not that kind, not a horror show, not a horror show. We talk about a fun little archetype here, evil educators, which is a really interesting, again, kind of an archetype of characters. We touch on several different ones, some of the obvious ones, Professor Snape and a little bit of Dolores Umbridge, who might be one of the best examples. But when you consider the number of people who you have characters that fall into this category, it's pretty wide-ranging. You have something of a more understandable and kind of benign in some respects antagonistic force, and like Principal Skinner from The Simpsons. Didn't bring up here, and I'm kicking myself. Go back and smack past me for not doing that. Again, to someone like Umbridge, who is the most vile, disgusting of creatures. A lot of Roald Dahl's antagonists fall into this category, and if you've read his mostly autobiographical work, Boy, you might understand where he draws inspiration for that. But there's a lot of them. There's actually quite a bit of them, and it's a fun one. This is one of those topics that if I were still doing the show, I might want to revisit. Not just because of some new entries into the group we'll be discussing, but it's a really kind of fun group to explore. So anyway, with that out of the way, here's the old episode. Myself and Jason Teasley from 2014. Any way you can interact with the product is always, always, always helpful. So thank you very much. Hope you enjoy the show.
When the devil is too busy and death a bit too much, they call on me by name, you see, for my special touch. To the gentlemen, I'm misfortune. To the ladies, I'm surprise. But call me by any name, anyway, it's all the same. I'm the fly in your suit, I'm the pest in your shoe, I'm the bee beneath your bed, I'm the bump on every head, I'm the heel on which you slip, I'm the pin in every head, I'm the thorn in your side, makes you wriggle and writhe, and it's so easy when you're evil. This is the life you see, the devil tips his hat to me, I do it all because I'm evil, and I do it all for free. Your tears are all the pay I'll ever need.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. I am your host, the authority on evil, Mr. Robert Winfree, and I'd like to thank you all for joining me on this very special Valentine's Day edition of Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. Now, before we really get going here tonight, I have a couple of quick notes of business. First of all, I have to apologize to those of you who don't know or weren't listening last week. Last week I was discussing Frankenstein's monster, kind of in honor of I, Frankenstein, just falling flat on its face at the box office. I wish I had a crash sound. I bet I do have one in here. I think Mark has one that he busts out from time to time. But it fell down flat on its face, so I was talking about the monster. And towards the end of that show, I believe in the last 20 minutes or so, Jesse Starcher called in. We had a fun little conversation. He reminded me about the character about the Mr. Munster, Fred Gwynn's portrayal of the creature from the classic television show. And after he hung up and I wound up closing out the show, I mistakenly referred to him as Jason Teasley. Now, there's a couple of quick reasons for this. One, I had talked with Jason about being my guest for that show for a variety of reasons. He wasn't able to make it. I knew that going in. And so that was kind of where my mind was. I also have a thing with J names. For some reason, I confuse them. They get jumbled up very easily in my brain. I'm not quite sure why, but that's the way it has been for a while. So my apologies, Jesse Starcher, Jason Teasley, both two very different people, and if their posts are to be believed, Jesse Starcher is a much more attractive person. So my apologies to both of them. They're separate and distinct entities. Hopefully it won't happen again. This week, this is kind of the other thing I wanted to mention. If I'd planned ahead and realized, oh, hey, it's Valentine's Day, and I have here free reign for an hour. I have an hour of live time. That's how long I scheduled it for. To just kind of rant and rave and be anti-happiness and joy and kick puppies and spit on rainbows and whatever else I feel inclined to do. I probably would have done something like that because, it's Valentine's Day and I like being kind of the contrary, and even though society seems to have turned against it, and I'm now like part of the herd of people who are just single and hate it. But I had already had a topic lined up when that particular thought crossed my mind. So this week we are talking about evil educators. It's a classic trope of 80s cinema. You have the evil teacher who opposes the kids who just want to do what they want to do, and straight-laced educators in particular seem to catch this a lot, and not just from the 80s, but it's a classic kind of trope that a lot of people and a lot of stories have used, and I wanted to talk about some of the more prominent ones, some of my favorites, hopefully some of your favorites. And to get things going, not Jesse Starcher is here with us today, folks. Jason Teasley is here. Everybody join me in welcoming him to the show. You're on live now, Jason. How you doing today?
All right, Robert. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Got the whole you and Jesse are two different people figured out thing.
Oh yeah, it's easy to get mistaken. J names tend to kind of run together.
So how are things in West Virginia? You guys snowed in too, like they are in the Carolinas and whatnot, or did you get spared most of that?
Well, it started Wednesday night. Yesterday I had 14 inches of snow in my front yard, so it's kind of sucked. So
oh, sorry.
I pulled a Mark Radledge and went outside and started going door to door singing, "Do you want to build a snowman?" So.
Anybody take you up on the offer?
No, I threatened to get shot a couple of times.
I've been there. But I also installed home security systems for summer. So,
it happens.
It does. It takes all kinds, and some of those kinds are more than a little unhinged. But, I talk about unhinged people in my spare time here on this show, so it all works. It all fits in. So, you're on here. You mentioned you have some other stuff you have to get to. It is Valentine's Day. You do have a significant other. So, this is going to be your time for a little bit here. What's on your mind as far as this topic goes?
I figured, I'd call in. We do a little Professor Snape action, talk about, the realm of Harry Potter. So I figured that'd be right up your alley. I
have read all those books. I used to go through them. I'm a voracious reader when I'm in the mood. I would go through a Harry Potter book in a space of 12 hours.
Well, I couldn't read a Harry Potter book in the span of 12 months. But
so,
you
did watch. Everybody saw the movies. I saw the movies. Alan Rickman, fantastic choice. Since we're talking about Snape, to embody the bane of Harry's existence as far as just day-to-day things go. I mean, you have Voldemort that's kind of the big bad, even though he's not much of a presence throughout half the books or so. Instead, you've got Snape, who just wants to make everyone's life miserable. And so just kind of going, into the films there, did you enjoy, was Alan Rickman the right choice as far as you're concerned? Someone else kind of crossed your mind when, inevitably, the books made gobs of money, so films were inevitable. Was he kind of your first fantasy casting choice, or was there someone else that kind of crossed your mind?
No, going into this, like I said, I had never read the books or anything, so I was going in, saw the movies blind. It kind of became a ritual with me and my little cousin, that he was interested. He read all the Harry Potter books. So as the movies come out, through the years, me and him would always go kind of put that day aside, and me and him go check them out. And it's kind of one of those things that once you see an actor in the role, you can't imagine anybody else playing that role.
Yeah.
So I think going in, they picked the perfect actor to play it, just through his body language, just the smug demeanor that he had on his face through most of the movies. Just kind of that aristocratic, I'm better than you, smug look just came off amazing.
Yeah, when I can't remember how old I was when the first one came out. It was either in high school or just about out of it. But when they announced that Alan Rickman was playing Snape, I hadn't thought about it, who I would like to see play the character, but it was just absolutely perfect casting as far as that goes. I mean, and that's also because Alan Rickman plays an exceptional villainous character. Just casting him as a villain is usually the correct move. I mean, he was I hate to say hands down the best part of the first Die Hard movie because it's one of my all-time favorites, but that movie without Alan Rickman as Hans Gruber is just not quite as perfect as it is with Alan Rickman as Hans Gruber. And the guy just is a wonderful villainous character as an actor, and he can, he's a fantastic actor. He can play a wide range of characters, but for some reason, when he is able to play a bad guy, and it's probably all the years he spent doing Shakespeare, he's just able to really kind of sink his teeth into it and have fun with it.
Yeah, I mean, he's a highly decorated stage actor beyond the accolades that he's received through his theatrical stuff. But, yes, on a stage, he's received pretty much almost quite a few awards, if I'm not mistaken, for his, Shakespearean work.
Yeah, I'd have to look it up. I mean, I was actually, a while ago, I forget how long, but I was looking his filmography up just kind of out of curiosity, and I was shocked. The man's never been nominated for an Oscar, which just kind of blew my mind when I actually thought about it, when you consider the quality of his work. I mean, as far as, the last Harry Potter movie goes, I would have been wholeheartedly in favor of him getting a Best Supporting Actor nomination, just because that was kind of the last one, Deathly Hallows Part 2, is where you actually got to see kind of the full range of not only the character, but of what Alan Rickman could do with it. And I would have been wholeheartedly in favor of him at least getting a nomination. I forget who won that year and, the whole 9 yards, but just the fact that he's not been nominated for it. I mean, even just nominated, it just kind of blew my mind when I realized.
Yeah, I could see that, a Best Supporting or something. Because, I mean, throughout the course of Harry Potter, just the tweaks and turns that the character done and how he portrayed them so flawlessly.
Yeah, he goes from being just kind of the teacher who wants to make Harry's life miserable, and then you get little like I said, little tweaks like then the first one at the end when you're like, no, he wasn't trying to kill Harry, he was actually trying to save him, and like, wait a minute, but he's still even though he tries to save him and he's on the right side, he's still such a jackass at times that it's almost like there are some guys who you just love watching because they're bad, and it's just really kind of in pro wrestling parlance, you get the cool heels. In the case of Snape, he was almost like, this is not an accurate one-to-one comparison, but he was kind of like the Super Cena character, in that he's a good guy, but you just don't want to like him.
Well, I was going to go with maybe the Triple H of early DX after Shawn left. That kind of cool heel that he does douchebaggish things, but yeah, he does them in a way that you kind of like the guy for doing them.
I know what you mean, and it's true. And just some of the things that he does, and this is kind of where a lot of these, evil teachers that I'm going to wind up getting into, they take such malicious glee in the smallest of, whatever little torment they can inflict on the people they don't like. And I mean, another example, just kind of by way of, you mentioned that you're familiar with the character from The Breakfast Club, which I finally got around to watching the other day in preparation for this, and just the way that he's able to, clearly the man's life did not live up to his own expectations. So part of what gives his existence joy is detaining these teenagers over the course of their Saturday.
Yeah, just pretty much doing it in a way that just kind of in such a asshole-ish way, like he's upset that he even has to be there, so he's just going to torment them for making him be there on that Saturday.
Yeah, and I found an interesting little bit of just watching that character kind of change and reveal more of his nature, because in the beginning he's just, kind of a straight, you get the sense that he's got at least 12 inches of hardwood shoved firmly up his posterior, just kind of by his nature, but he goes for, he starts out very straight-laced, very, kind of by the numbers, and then once he and Bender kind of start getting into it, he busts out some of those I mean, at this point they're cliches, but I assume in, like, the mid-'80s when the movie came out, they weren't necessarily, he's throwing, he has that stupid, and I've always hated the phrase, you mess with the bull, you get the horns, because not only is it it's just such an arrogant thing to assume that you are the bull. But so he starts off with that, and then he starts throwing out. I got a kick out of that whole sequence when he's throwing on, weekend after weekend after weekend at him, and at the end, by the end, I mean, just to kind of illustrate how far, both gone he was. He didn't even know how many extra detentions he'd given the guy, and he got that, one of those kind of cheesy lines when he says, I've got you here for the rest of your natural-born life if I want you, and it's just, but he's just such a prick about it.
Yeah, I mean, but it's one of those roles that I couldn't, like we was talking with Snape, couldn't see anybody but him playing. I mean, Paul Gleason does a great job of just being that asshole, honestly. I mean, he is a pure evil.
I assume most people had a teacher like that.
Oh, everybody has had a teacher like that. I mean, he's just he's a strict bully, but he isn't really pure evil. And it finds out that it isn't easy teaching students anything.
I mean, that was kind of my thing, was when he's sitting there drinking beer with the janitor, kind of at the start of the third act, if memory serves, about the timing, and he says, look at these kids, and in 20 years, they're going to be running the country. And, I remember myself in high school. I wouldn't have trusted me with anything. I remember, the people I was around, and just kind of on the outside looking, it's like, and then, especially when you consider that, the characters from the film that he's overseeing, it's just like, I wouldn't be entirely comfortable handing the future over to people like that, if that's all you see of them. I mean, teenage years in high school in particular are just kind of god-awful for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, I look back at 15, 16-year-old me, and it's like, really, I understand why because I was a complete jerk. I was a snot-nosed little brat that was just, an arrogant prick that, thought I could do no wrong. And so if I could go back in a time machine or something, I would totally put a foot in my own ass.
Yeah, I hear you. When I was in high school, I suffered from pretty severe depression, but I was kind of the same way. I was like, you couldn't. I was willing to learn. It's this odd dichotomy where I was willing to learn, but it was just so hard for me to get out of my own way and accept that, hey, other people are smarter than you, which is. And
it's the Sheldon complex.
I'm going to. That's what, a Big Bang reference.
Yes.
Okay, I don't watch sitcoms as a general rule. But I've seen enough. No, go ahead.
I was going to say I would have never guessed due to your the whole sing along with Patrick and Mark that you don't watch sitcoms.
Oh God! For anyone who doesn't know, at the end of the last 411 Ground and Pound radio show, which airs live every Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern, Mark Radulich, the host of the show and owner of the Radulich and Broadcasting Network, of which we are a part, and Pat Mullen, fellow panelist, along with myself, decided it was a good idea to break into 80s sitcom theme songs, which I knew none of. I have no idea any of the lyrics. There were a couple of songs that I could place to shows, but I had nothing. I contributed absolutely nothing to that segment. Of course, that segment contributed very little to anything apart from amusement of people listening, but yeah, I was at a complete. I got to sit there and just enjoy, middle-aged men off-key singing "Charles in Charge," which was just hilarious.
It was Patrick in charge.
Oh yeah, how do you do that? There's not enough syllables. It doesn't work with the flow of the song.
Hey,
which was actually my first thought.
Anything.
Yeah, yes, Pat can do pretty much anything.
All right, let's bring his background back on topic before we get too far down the rabbit trail.
Yeah, less the tangent to come to the point where you can't replace it. But since I've still got you for a couple of minutes here, we talked about Breakfast Club, which is kind of John Hughes' seminal film. Same directors, film that was actually shot back-to-back with it. One of my favorites. I tend to have low tolerance for a lot of, I'd say crappy 80s stuff. And what we're talking about here does not fall into the category of, low quality. So, but just as a general rule for anyone out there, that's one of those things I tend to have a low tolerance for. But I absolutely love Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I can't remember the specifics of the first time I saw it, but I want to say like 11. I was at a friend's of my mother's house. Someone quoted it, and I didn't get the reference, and it was then decided that, no, you have to see this movie. So I saw it and have seen it. I try to see it once a year, give or take, ever since, because I get such a kick out of it. But the antagonist there, Edward Rooney, the dean of students, and he's, for my money, he's the first one that comes to my mind when I think of, principals or teachers who are just kind of wound too tight jackasses who you wish to see struck with heavy objects. So I'm just kind of
I could see that.
So I just want to get your thoughts on Rooney in particular.
Well, I mean, it's been, I'm going to say at least 10 years since I've seen Ferris Bueller. But, I mean, it's just one of those movies. It's a timeless classic. I mean, especially for an 80s film.
Yeah.
But like I said, I mean, Rooney just plays that. I've got to one up you. You can never get one by me. I'll what's the word I'm looking for? I'll shoot you down at every possible turn when you try to get one by me. So I mean, it kind of adds to his character a lot. That it's just basically a cat and mouse. The movie plays out like a cat and mouse movie. It's just Rooney trying to catch Bueller, Bueller trying to, do everything in the world to not get caught, but yet gets himself in these situations and he just barely escapes getting noticed.
Which I always found, which just kind of add to the humor of the whole sequence. He catches a fly ball on Wrigley Field, and there's a close-up of him on and the cameras give a close-up of him. There's an article in the paper about the town rallying around him. Wrigley Field has the Save Ferris thing flash up on there.
And who can forget the twist and shout montage in the parade?
Oh, I love that whole... I mean, for someone who would theoretically be laying low, he does everything possible to be in the limelight.
Yeah, and it adds to the comedic value of, because it's like, okay, he's doing everything to not get noticed, but like I said, finds himself in those situations where it's just polarized.
I mean, what was the line? There's like 7,000 restaurants in the downtown area. I choose the one my father goes to.
Yeah.
And he winds up jogging next to his dad in the final sequence as he's racing home. And I mean, just to kind of stay on track here as far as Rooney goes, I understand the desire to not be at the whim of, kind of the slacker, do nothing. Bueller's not a classic slacker in the sense that, I mean, he wants to do as little as possible, which is kind of obvious, but he's not, the, kind of grungy, I'm going to burn the school down, or I'm going to show up to class and just sleep through everything. There's clearly at least some level of engagement. He just likes doing whatever he wants to do, and I can understand not wanting to, kind of have to be outsmarted and outmaneuvered by someone like that, because it's aggravating as all get out. The fact that he's just such a douchebag about it. He breaks into their house.
Bueller is the perfect slacker in the sense that I'll do twice as much work to not get caught than I would to actually just do what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, although, to be fair, I'd go through the extra effort to avoid the Ben Stein lecture. Do you know the story about that?
No, I don't. I've not got like much.
Okay, quick story. When they cast Ben Stein in the role of the teacher, they had him do the attendance thing. Then they wanted him to give a lecture, and the director just told him, pick a topic you feel comfortable discussing, that you feel kind of knowledgeable about, then you give a lecture, and we'll just kind of film everyone's reaction to it. And just kind of knowing the way Ben Stein talks and his speech patterns, and even if it's a subject that he was very engaged in, it was going to come off as the most boring thing on the face of the planet. So the fact that he's sitting there discussing the economic situations during the Reagan administration, after that whole scene was done shooting, he got a standing ovation from everyone. And his father, who was there at the time, thought it was because he did such a great job explaining the fallacy of Reaganomics, as opposed to just being as absolutely boring as it came off being.
Yeah, I mean, it's I'm seeing here. It says John Hughes Tobinstein, who has a degree in economics, to present an actual economics lecture in the scenes. Hence, nothing Bernstein said except for roll call is scripted.
Yeah, it's a great, and just, again, understanding an actor, especially someone like, so in the Ben Stein role there. And just in that, I never had a teacher as boring as the Ben Stein character, but man, I had a couple that were close.
Oh, I had one. He was a history teacher. It was funny. Just another quick fact here. Let me find it again. But it's during conversations that, did you ever notice that there was only one character between that spoke through the whole thing? It was between Ferris and
Fry. Between like Bueller and Fry, when they have the teenager who gives the exacerbated, I used to know. That's one of those movies I used to be able to quote by heart from start to finish, and I can't do it anymore because I haven't seen it in too long.
No, it's whenever Mr. Rooney and Ferris have conversations with each other, only one of them speaks throughout the entire conversation. The other is completely silent.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. But yeah, because he calls him on the phone to say he's sick, and then Rooney catches him in the end, and they're both shell-shocked at the circumstances, and neither one says anything to the other one.
Yeah.
No,
but,
I had no.
Robert,
that's cool.
I'm gonna have to. I begrudgingly have to go ahead and head on out, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Hey, you're welcome anytime.
All right, man. Like I said, hey, if you ever come across anything sports related, Thursday nights 9 o'clock, you can join me and Cooper on From the Cheap Seats.
Hey, I listened to you guys since you started. You just had your second episode. I'm enjoying it.
It's really just the first. It's kind of like X-Men 3. We don't count the debut one. We kind of treat it like X-Men 3. We just pretend it never happened.
Oh, I wish I could pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah, me too. I wish I could pretend that first Cheap Seats episode never happened. But last night's went fairly good. I mean, it was kind of funny. We had some laughs during it, but like I said, man, I really appreciate you having me on tonight as a little special guest to talk a little bit about some knowledgeable things. I don't have much knowledge, but I do have the occasional quib of information.
Hey, like I said, you're welcome back here anytime. If you've got a topic you want to talk about, or if I've got something coming up that interests you, just let me know. I'll do everything I can to get you on.
All right, I appreciate it, man.
Have a good
night, Robert.
Yeah, you too. All right, that does it for Jason Teasley. I'd like to thank him again for stopping by and talking a little evil educators with me. Now, I haven't touched on a big one yet because when Jason was here, I wanted to make sure we got through everything he wanted to talk about. But when I have a hard time finding some lists for some topics that I want to discuss on this show. I Google lists of, like, when I was doing the best TV villains, counting down to Breaking Bad's conclusion, I found gobs of lists, and I covered pretty much everyone I wanted to cover. Every now and then I'll come up with a topic, or I'll have a thought cross my mind, and I can't find lists. I can't find people who have, and I know they're out there. I mean, I know I'm not the only person who has noticed the trend in certain types of films or stories or what have you, to have teachers or principals or deans or, insert educational position here. I'm not the only one who's noticed that there are people like that who are jerks, and they're deliberately portrayed that way. But I could not find lists that would give me kind of the raw data for me to comb through, or names that I wanted to bring up specifically, but one of the ones that I knew I had to get to, and that I'm going to bring up now is, and I don't have all there they are. I do have the names. I was prepared. But the dean from Animal House. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, just kind of a funny aside, the character of Mr. Vernon, Richard Vernon, in The Breakfast Club, I don't know, something about the name Vernon seems to inspire that type of personality, because you have that character named, and the actor who played the dean in Animal House, and I'm going to look up his name right now. You have to give me a second. Live radio. I should have written this down. I can't believe I didn't. John Vernon, who, ironically enough, plays Dean Vernon Warmer. So something about that name. I don't know if the Breakfast Club character was designed specifically after Vernon from Animal House or not, but his whole thing is, if you've never seen Animal House, and I would encourage you to look it up if you haven't, because John Belushi, I don't know how high he was when he was doing this particular film, but given that he tended to be more entertaining when he was, I might get in trouble for this. Not that anyone's actually listening, but he's kind of like Chevy Chase, the joke on Family Guy, no junk, no soul. So I don't know how high he was when he was doing this film, but if his level of entertainment goes up, the more inebriated or intoxicated or whatever he was, then I don't know what he was on for this, but this is just one of those movies that, classic comedy, if you have a taste for this sort of thing. And opposing the party frat house, and this is one of the reasons that this topic, I kind of approach it from two different sides, because I have, personally speaking, I don't care much for the party attitudes, or, hey, it's going to be fun if we just get drunk every day, have a hangover, pass out all day, wake up at night, wake up when the sun goes down, start drinking. I don't have much sympathy or much ability to relate to situations like that, or characters who voluntarily put themselves in situations like that. So I tend to immediately my initial response is kind of siding with the authority figure who looks at that and goes, this is a horrible waste of everyone's time and energy. And so to kind of go along with it, takes a special class of both actor and written character to make me look at him and go, okay, you're a pain. You are in the wrong. How dare you try and interfere with these people who just want to, get drunk and have fun. And Dean Vernon Warmer was one of those guys who was able to make me dislike him when my natural inclination is to kind of sympathize with his position. And it's not an easy thing to do when, again, your natural inclination is to agree with them, but delivery and the way it's written and just the way it's acted by John Vernon, it's just, he comes off as this superior, arrogant, how dare they pollute my institution of higher learning. And I'm all for, less of the stupidity in the world. By the same token, these guys aren't causing huge amounts of property damage. They're not causing all that many problems. I mean, yes, it's, you kind of go away from that frat house. If you're a serious academic student, you don't go there. If you're giving the alumni their tour, you kind of steer clear of that one. But, I'm pretty sure like every college that has a group of fraternities has at least one that falls into the category that you have with the Animal House there. And it's just kind of reality. And maybe it sucks and maybe it's aggravating. But the issue with, Vernon, Dean Vernon, I'm just going to kind of refer to him as that, just so I don't get confused going between characters and actors and characters across different films. The issue becomes, it's not that he doesn't want them, it's not that he wants these people to succeed and what they're doing isn't working, it's that he wishes for them to either conform with his vision or go away entirely. And for me, that's kind of the line in the sand, and everyone's line is different, but that's where I kind of go, okay, there's a difference between wanting the best for someone and trying to encourage them and saying, I wish you to fit into X mold. Now, the fact that the characters are all not just so far away from the mold, or so far away from this particular mold that you almost wish they would conform a little bit more is irrelevant, because this guy's just a hardline, backstabbing douchebag that you wish to see get his comeuppance, which he does. I mean, they all do, more or less, which is part of the greatness of some of these films, or some of them don't, which is kind of the irony of the evil teacher position, is that sometimes they just kind of wind up at the end of the film, or they just wind up going on, and maybe they've learned something, maybe they haven't, maybe they've just kind of survived. I mean, that's the case. I talked a little bit about Edward Rooney from Ferris Bueller. He gets front-kicked in the face. Long before Anderson Silva front-kicked Vitor Belfort, Jennifer Grey front-kicked Edward Rooney in the face and knocked him out cold. And a great scene. But he gets knocked out, the dog attacks him, loses his shoe in the mud. I mean, plenty of bad things happen to him, but at the end of the film, he's not arrested, he's not fired, he's not, I wouldn't even go to say he's completely publicly disgraced, in the sense that he can't go back to his job. He just has lost completely and decisively in every sense of the competition between Ferris Bueller and himself. And I very much doubt it made him change his opinion and his approach or anything like that. He's just been bested. Which in the case of Ferris Bueller's Day Off in that story is enough. It's enough to beat the guy. You don't need to undo him. And just kind of by the same token, going back to the Breakfast Club with Vice Principal or Assistant Principal Vernon, I forget the specifics of his title. He's not undone by the end of that film. I mean, I would, it's that Saturday. I would assume that on Monday he's back in his office doing his thing, and life continues to go on as life tends to do. And he's a very. I mentioned that I liked the way his character is revealed because it's interesting. He's also kind of a static character in that he doesn't. And I very much doubt his opinions of the youth of that generation or those kids in particular was altered all that much by the end of the film or in the next 30 years. I mean, some people are just like that. But some of them do kind of get their comeuppance. And when I announced that I was doing this particular list, I had people ask I asked people, I put it out there on Facebook and Twitter and whatnot, if you have anyone you want me to talk about, any suggestions, I'm more than open to taking them. And I always am. And one of the ones that someone brought up to me, I didn't get a chance to actually watch the film, but I couldn't help but pay attention to it just because of the dichotomy was, I forget the year, but it was a film called Election. It stars Reese Witherspoon and Matthew Broderick. But Matthew Broderick goes from being, for me, I think his kind of defining role is and always will be Ferris Bueller, and that's just kind of what everyone thinks of him as. He goes from that, and in this particular film, he gets to play the jerk teacher who's trying to rig the student election to keep Reese Witherspoon from becoming student body president. There's I want to say this was either early to mid-'90s that film came out, and I'm going to look it up now because it's bothering me and I wish to be informed about it. But there was a bit of one of those kind of before its time, 99. Wow, 99. I am older than I thought I was. That came out in 1999. I was thinking mid-'90s. But yeah, there was a bit of, the whole kind of student-teacher sex scandal thing that sadly translated into real life. But it was portrayed in there, and I haven't seen it yet, but I can just imagine the dichotomy of, again, the guy who kind of will forever, in my mind, at least be Ferris Bueller, turning into not exactly Edward Rooney, but that type of character, and it's kind of an interesting little playoff of each other. And he's not an irredeemable character. If I haven't seen it, so I'm going off of what I've read about it. In that he winds up leaving the state, he gets fired, he moves to New York and takes a different job, but it's apparently one that makes him a lot happier as a person. But he's kind of undone in the sense that he's no longer a teacher. He winds up divorced, something to that effect. Again, I'm just kind of going off the top of my head here. But, again, some of them are just, they don't get undone in the classical sense of, the fall from grace. They maybe are bested or are overcome, but they don't always have that big fall, which is one of the things that, just to kind of bring that back to Animal House, is Dean Vernon does get undone. He winds up like in a convalescence home or something after the final bit where the parade is ruined by our protagonists who are willing to work twice as hard as any bit of school would ever do for them. Here's the other one I kind of wanted to talk about very briefly, and I might get some flack for this, but I wound up kind of incidentally watching the film Old School, which is an odd thing for me to watch because I'm not a huge fan of Will Ferrell. I despise both Wilsons, Owen and Luke. I mean, I just have never been entertained by either of them in any capacity. In fact, unless they're dying. If they're dying, it's okay. Okay. Yes, Jesse Starcher. For those of you playing the home game, Jesse Starcher has reminded me that Matthew Broderick was the protagonist in the 1998 Roland Emmerich version of Godzilla, which incidentally enough I have seen multiple times and can still watch and enjoy. It's a crappy Godzilla movie. It's not a bad monster movie if you don't mind turning off your brain and just enjoying the visual imagery as you eat your popcorn. I mean, things could be worse. But as I was saying, some of my favorite movies, incident, I didn't know this until I thought about it later, are movies wherein Luke Wilson dies, or Owen Wilson. Just kind of for example, the movie Anaconda, Ice Cube, Jennifer Lopez, Big Giant Snake, John Voight. I talked about it briefly here when I had Sam Mercati on, and we talked about animals. They get in honor of Shark Week, we talked about Evil, and we brought up Anaconda, and Owen Wilson dies in it. He gets eaten by the snake. Happiest, I was thrilled. The Michael Bay film Armageddon, one of his better films, and Bay is really hit or miss. But Owen Wilson dies in that too, and I didn't. So if Owen Wilson or Luke Wilson are dying in a film, I'm happy. That makes me happy. But anyway, he's in old. So Luke Wilson's kind of the main character in Old School. You also have Will Ferrell, who again not my favorite comedic actor in the world, but your mileage varies. Humor is one of those things that's I've mentioned this before, but there are two things as far as each person is concerned that are so deeply personal, judging them based on them or trying to debate them or critique is just an exercise in futility. That's your taste in music and your taste and your comedic sensibilities. Those are two things that are just so inexplicably twined with who you are that if you try to debate things that you like, you wind up just at the inexorable point of, well, I like it. And criticism and critiques and other people's opinions be damned, it speaks to me. And fair point. Everyone's like that with, especially those two things in particular. But in the film Old School, you have Jeremy Piven, who, I don't quite know what to say about Jeremy Piven, just because he almost made me root for Luke Wilson, which is crazy, but he is the dean of the school, of the titular school, the eponymous school. And he's just he's one of those caricatures because he has glasses and he wears a sweater vest which is one of those teacher kind of stereotypes that I don't know why it got started or where it came from. But in film, you see them and they're wearing sweater vests. I mean, if anyone's ever seen, and again, I mentioned before, I'm not big on sitcoms, but I believe there's or David Spade for that matter, but in the sitcom Just Shoot Me, I believe there's a bit where David Spade is sent undercover because he's small and looks like a child undercover to a high school, and he verbally thrashes the English teacher, and one of the things he mocks about him is his sweater vest. So it's one of those tropes. But Jeremy Piven wears one every scene that he's in. I believe he's wearing a sweater vest. I haven't seen the movie in a long time, so I'm going just off of memory. And he doesn't like the kind of three main characters because they picked on him when they were in college or something to that effect, and now he's in a position of authority, and he chooses to kind of lord it over them and make their lives difficult, and is just another obnoxious little twit ball that you wish to see dropped on his head. Which is kind of a common theme for these. I've never encountered, I don't believe, off the top of my head, I've encountered the archetypal evil educator, any character who I actually wished death up, and which is an odd thing because I've wished death on several people, and real and fictional, and I've never met one of them that I thought, God, I wish you would die. I mean, yeah, sure, I wish, get hit by a bus. I don't care how fast the bus is moving, mind you. Get hit by a bus, sprain your ankle, get beat up, fall into the mud pit and struggle getting up. I mean, just all kinds of things like that. But you very rarely actually wish serious bodily harm or death on these characters. And Jeremy Piven is no exception. I don't recall wishing death on his character, but I haven't seen the movie in forever. But it's an odd kind of location along the spectrum of evil that these particular characters tend to exist in, that you don't want, death, torture, dismemberment, etc. visited on them, but you can't help but wish something bad would happen. And again, there's a spectrum. There's no black-white line, but it's a really, because there's not a whole lot of other characters or character types that I can think of off the top of my head that exist in that realm. Even with some of the others that I might get into later as far as just types go, I mean, like, I go out on a limb here and say even, bullies, which is one that I'm going to get, a topic that I'm going to get to here eventually. There are some characters in literature and film and whatnot that are just kind of the typical bully, and I remember wishing death on, like actual death. Like, no, your character can die at the end of this, and I'm perfectly okay with that. And it's not something that, again, that's kind of the exception as far as bullies go. You generally just wish for them to be smashed in the face repeatedly, which is odd because, like, hey, multiple facial lacerations will break the bones, knocks, potential brain damage, all kinds of fun stuff like that. But no, just don't kill them. It's an odd line. I don't know, and maybe I'm in the minority there, but there were some that I actually wished death on, and I'm looking over my list here of guys that I haven't got to all of them, and unfortunately I won't be able to due to time constraints and my own lack of proper research. But again, there's very few of them that I actually wanted dead. I wished for them. You want to see them get what's coming to them. But in this case, their trespasses, their sins do not necessarily merit fatality. And the last one I wanted to talk about, because this is kind of what inspired the list for this week, or the topic, not list. These are not lists. Lists are designed to get hits and make other people, just so other people can whine about placements between 1 and 2. Haha. Sorry, that's it. That's an ongoing joke on the kind of at the 411 Mania staff that you make lists just so people can complain about the difference between number 1 and number 2, because people will. It's in their nature. I've done it, and will do it in the future. Anyway, the last one that I wanted to talk about before I wrap this up is, and what inspired this was the original Back to the Future film, which is what inspired this. But Mr. Strickland he was kind of my first exposure to that character of kind of the jackass in charge. And because he is the bane of Marty's existence in the beginning of Back to the Future. And he's one of those guys who actually kind of looks a bit intimidating with, the bald head and short, stocky guy. And it just can actually kind of be intimidating when he chooses to be. But he's very much a disciplinarian. He's very strict, and he's kind of the bane of Marty's existence when we meet him in the beginning. And he goes back to 1955, and Strickland is bald in that iteration of time too. And to which Marty's response is, "Didn't that guy ever have hair?" I mean, the irony, of course, being that his ancestor Marshall Strickland in the third film has very long hair, if memory serves, flowing like down to his shoulders or something. But he has very little patience for Marty, and even when you go back in time and you see the fact that Marty's dad, George, is just kind of mercilessly picked on and tormented by Biff Tannen and his lackeys, his flunkies, stooges, hangers-on, insert various generic insult there. He dismisses all of them for putting the, kick me sign on George's back. He gets mad he disperses the students that are doing it. And after all that, he looks at George and goes, if you keep letting them do this to you, they're going to be doing this to you for the rest of your life. And he has just no sympathy at all for the predicament he's in, because the way George kind of carries himself and is at that time invites that particular brand of attention. It's a really kind of odd, position that he's put in, but he's not the main antagonist as far as that goes. You have both the Time and Biff Tannen, who I will get to at some point or the other. But the other thing about Strickland, and this is kind of an odd thing to say, but the scene in Back to the Future Part 2, where after Marty comes back from their excursion to the future and finds his timeline changed into this dystopian view that resembles modern-day Detroit to a startling degree, he winds up stealing Mr. Strickland's newspaper. Doesn't know it's Strickland. He's just at the house, picks up the newspaper to make sure that he actually came back to the right date. And there's Strickland in his pajamas and slippers with a shotgun and a bandolier full of ammo. And he and Marty interact briefly, and then some gangbangers drive by and shoot up his house, and he proceeds to run into the street, firing his shotgun at them, yelling, "Eat lead, slackers." And the oddest thing about that sequence is it makes complete sense for that character and for the way he was portrayed. And it just, to go from being just the disciplinarian in the school who has no patience for Marty because he's kind of a slacker and doesn't like his attitude, to running down a street firing after a car with a shotgun. And for that to be at least a somewhat logical leap, and for it not to be, that's not the most jarring part of that sequence. Strickland with a shotgun makes sense. Everything else around it doesn't, but that character being armed and get off my lawn and actually meaning it and being threatening with it, I buy that. It makes sense. And of course, part of that might also have to do with the fact that it doesn't seem too odd for me, because I also remember that actor being the captain in charge of the aircraft carrier that oversees Maverick and Goose in Top Gun. He's their commanding officer, and I kept waiting for him to refer to them as slackers, because I saw Top Gun after I saw Back to the Future, though I believe Top Gun came out first. I still wanted him to do it because it would have been funny, and it would have been accurate, because Tom Cruise, Anthony Edwards, yeah, they were the type of slackers that he was constantly getting aggravated at. All right, that's going to kind of wrap up my discussion here. I might revisit this topic again in the future. If anyone out there wants, if I've missed someone that you feel I should have brought up, feel free to hit me up on Facebook or on Twitter. Facebook, I'm just Robert Winfree. On Twitter, you can find me at Winfree MMA because that's primarily what I write about on 411 Mania. So follow me, hit me up there if you are so inclined. I'm on Facebook. Just Robert Winfree. If you wish to, just tell me that I suck, or how dare you overlook something, or know you got something completely wrong, or on the odd chance that you enjoy this and wish to be complimentary, I encourage that as well. All right. For my plugs. If you're interested in MMA, mixed martial arts, I have a weekly column over on 411mania.com. It's in the MMA zone. It's called Locked in the Guillotine. It goes live every Friday. It's live right now. In this week, I discuss news, including Dana White burying two of his fighters, Daniel Cormier getting injured, or not Daniel Cormier, Rashad Evans getting injured, Daniel Cormier getting a late replacement, and all the couple of different guys getting busted for marijuana and almost ruining their careers in the process. I did not get around to talking about the UFC's new bonus structure. For anyone who knows what that is, I will next week. I also break down the upcoming UFC Fight Night 36, Mousasi versus Machida main card, which will be coming to you live tomorrow. From Brazil, Mark Radulich, God bless him, will have coverage on live coverage on 411 Mania if you can't or don't wish to watch it and just wish to follow along. And he'll probably have some funny pictures of chickens that he will post if there's a bogus decision. For what's coming up for me, actually this Tuesday, a couple of days from now, I will be on the Long Road to Ruin. Yes, that most famous of podcasts that I very much enjoy and I'm always happy to be a part of. But co-founder and co-host Sean Comer is taking some time off. He's recharging his batteries. Hope you get all your stuff sorted out. You feel better soon. But Mark Radulich needed someone to talk Back to the Future with him and thought of me. So thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. I was practically raised on those films. So I'm looking forward to that one. And that's this Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern. It goes live. Mark Radulich and I are going to be talking about Back to the Future. It should be awesome. We've got a great title card that was made by Benjamin J. Cologne, who you can find at Soul Exo. I believe that's SOUL.EXO, or just Google Benjamin J. Cologne. He does the title cards for Long Road to Ruin, does a great job. And we've got a great one up for this week. So thank you to Benjamin for that. I'll be back next week, and I'm debating between two topics. I'm either going to dive into bullies, or I am starting an epic run looking at various comic book villains, because everybody I know seems to have an opinion on those ones. So it's between those. I'll make a determination between now and Friday, and a lot of fun is going to be had. I will see you back here then, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you very much for joining me. I'm finding my outro music. There it is. Well, it's not even music. It's just a soundbite. But thank you for joining me here. I'll be back next week. Until then, remember, you need bad guys to make good guys look better. A baby face is only as strong as the heel he's opposing. And, I need a better outro. I need to figure that one out. But I will see you guys next week, right here, same time, same channel. Until then, remember, thank bad guys and appreciate darkness, because it contrasts the light. You can't just have one.
So say good night to the bad guys.